There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Those who remember the New Left mostly think of it as an American phenomenon of the 1960s. The New Left is blended in the popular imagination with hippie culture, along with the Beatles, sexual promiscuity, drug use, and flower power. However, according to Wikipedia, Stuart Hall, the New Left Review, C.L. R. James, and most others, the movement to form a new left started in 1956. It started after the Soviet Union brutally suppressed worker-led uprisings in Hungary. As per Hall, socialists after Hungary, it seems to us, must carry in their hearts the sense of tragedy which the degeneration of the Russian Revolution into Stalinism represented for the left. Today, however, the old left is having a comeback. That is, both the old social democratic welfare state and the Marxist-Leninist tradition are on the march, at least in our imaginations. The letters MLM adorn many a teenage Twitter profile, and an ambivalent love of the state has returned with a vengeance. As we examine our current political moment, as we try to figure out just why the American left has gone from Bernie Sanders to the streets as it prepares itself to be liquidated into the Democratic Party once again, we should ask to what extent the New Left's mission still defines our own, and consider why it is that so many young people, millennials and Zoomers both, call themselves Tankies. Why it is that so many reject the New Left's humanism, even as they accept its tactics and aims. Why do many long for the return of Stalin? And what does it mean that they sometimes imagine Stalin to be a queer trans person of color? We should allow ourselves to ask and try to answer the question, why so many Tankies? Hello Zero Books readers and viewers, it's me again, Douglas Lane, and in this video I'll consider the history of the New Left and Western Marxism, and consider how its failures, their failures, have led to a revival of the Old Left. Along the way I'll consider excerpts from the book Facing Reality, along with an excerpt from the upcoming Zero Books title Zeitgeist Nostalgia, written by Alessandro Gandini. In his book, Gandini notes that we are still living in the shadow of the 20th century. Particularly, we are living with the memory of the 1950s, or the golden age of capitalism, a period when the idea of the American dream, a house in the suburbs, a man at work, 2 kids, a picket fence, a Dodge Dart in the garage, and a dog in the yard, was firmly established. It was a time when profits were booming, a time when the consumer society was producing miracles, and a time when the Soviet dream, the dream of socialism, was dying.
And what are they ahead of us? Wrong.
In 1956, Nikita Khrushchev began a process of de-Stalinization in the Soviet Union and attempted to find a path to peaceful coexistence with the West. He gave his secret speech denouncing the crimes of Stalin and the Stalinist regime, a speech wherein First Secretary Khrushchev not only admitted that the mass campaign of repression that started in 1936, the rounding up of people on charges of terrorism and Trotskyism, the forced confessions, all of it was politically motivated and not a response to any really existing threat. But he also informed the closed plenum of the 20th Congress of the CPSU that Lenin had never really liked Stalin. This admission, along with the leaderless uprising in Hungary and the brutal repression that followed, led the admittedly already left Trotskyist C.L. R. James to declare that the inhumanity of the form of the bureaucratic totalitarian state, a form that he thought had both the East and the West in its grip, was finally exposed for the whole world to see. He also said that there was a movement of ordinary people forming, a movement of resistance, a movement for autonomy and humanism. In a publication called Facing Reality, published in 1958, C.L.R. James wrote, "For some years after the war, it seemed that the totalitarian state, by its control of every aspect of human life, had crushed forever all hopes for freedom, for liberty, and socialism. Men struggled, but under the belief that the welfare state was in reality only a halfway house to the ultimate totalitarian domination. A symbolic date was even fixed when this would be achieved all over the world. 1984. For the New Left, both the welfare state and the Soviet Union were fearsome. The West, with its consumerism, and the East, with its cults of personality, were both pointing in the same direction. A future where humanity would be flattened out. A future where we would be turned into one-dimensional men, stuck in cattle pens, and raised on either NBC or Pravda, Coca-Cola or vodka. The future would be a boot, stamping on a human face forever." After the Second World War, it was widely accepted on the left that the capitalist class had overcome the internal contradictions within capitalism. In the book Facing Reality, the collective of James Boggs and Castriadis wrote that fascism, corporate state, one-party state, welfare state, totalitarianism, all of these are ways in which rationalism attempts to adapt itself to the modern community. Therefore, it not only obstructs a new society, it destroys all the achievements of rationalism itself. To understand the full meaning of this quote, we should see it through the lens of the development of Castriadis' thought and of his eventual rejection of Marx's critique of political economy.
Το 49 είναι μια στιγμή όπου αυτή η ομάδα και εγώ ο ίδιος θεωρούμε τον εαυτό μας μαρξιστές.
Τώρα?
Εγώ όχι, το έχω γράψει από το 1964 ότι σήμερα μπαίνει το δίλημμα, είναι εξακολουθήσεις να είσαι μαρξιστής ή να είσαι επαναστάτης. Άρα τα δύο μαζί είναι ασυμβίβαστα, ας πούμε. Διότι ο μαρξισμός έχει γίνει κάτι τελείως διαφορετικό, είναι ένα νεκρό σώμα μιας ψευδοθεωρίας που δεν αναπτύσσεται και το οποίο κοινωνικά και ιστορικά λειτουργεί μόνο και μόνο σαν μια ιδεολογία, είτε για την νομιμοποίηση καθεστώτων εκμετάλλευσης και τρομοκρατίας όπως αυτά που υπάρχουν στις ανατολικές χώρες, είτε για την αναρρίχηση στην εξουσία ομάδων, οργανώσεων, κομμάτων σε υποανάπτυκτες χώρες και ότι αυτό το οποίο κάναμε εμείς στο σοσιαλισμό η βαρβαρότητα, και αν μου επιτρέπετε να πω αυτό το οποίο έκανα εγώ, αλλάζει κάτι σε αυτή την κατάσταση, δηλαδή προσέφερε στοιχεία για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση του κόσμου μέσα στον οποίο ζούμε, για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση των σκοπών μιας κοινωνικής αλλαγής, των τρόπων μιας κοινωνικής αλλαγής και για μια διαφορετική κατανόηση του ιστορικού κόσμου. Επί παραδείγματι, προσέφερε μια νομίζω τελείως διαφορετική κατανόηση και του προβλήματος της γραφειοκρατίας και του προβλήματος του μοντέρνου καπιταλισμού. Δηλαδή είμαστε οι μόνοι, είμαι ίσως ο μόνος ο οποίος από το 59-60 είπαμε και είπα ότι το πρόβλημα στη σύγχρονη δυτική ανεπτυγμένη καπιταλιστική κοινωνία δεν είναι το οικονομικό πρόβλημα. Δηλαδή δεν είναι το πρόβλημα της απαθλίωσης του προλεταριάτου, είτε σχετικής είτε απόλυτης, ότι το πρόβλημα είναι αλλού. Το πρόβλημα είναι η ελευθερία των ανθρώπων μέσα στην παραγωγή, το πρόβλημα είναι στην καθημερινή του ζωή, το πρόβλημα είναι στην οικογένεια, το πρόβλημα είναι στην εκπαίδευση κτλ.
Here, Castriadis is claiming that he was original, when in fact he was only stating, in perhaps slightly different words, what the New Left Review was claiming, namely that the economic basis of totalitarian revolution was no longer to be taken as an article of faith, and that the struggle for freedom should move from the realm of productive work to the realm of the street, or to the bedroom, or to the lunch counter, or to the third world nations, and so on. The Frankfurt School philosophers also believed that capitalism as an economic system was sustainable. Pollock, who was the main contributor to the Frankfurt School on the level of economics, believed that state capitalism created a situation wherein the market no longer functioned as a governor of production, but where production and consumption were instead determined by the general plan. According to Pollock, there were no economic causes that could prevent a state capitalist government from raising the general standard of living. The only impediments against general prosperity were, according to him, political. And this was different from how Stalin and Mao conceived of socialism, only in so much as Pollock was critical of state capitalism, or what Stalin and Mao would call socialism, because of the limits on freedom that it required. But what the Frankfurt School, Stalin, and Mao all agreed on was that the contradictions within capitalist economics could be overcome through the use of the state. And once the state could overcome capitalism, the need for a revolutionary working class could no longer be seen. By 1956, the dream of liberation brought about by a so-called dictatorship of the proletariat, a proletarian state guided by a communist party made up of the most progressive elements of the working class and the best of an intellectual vanguard, was, if not entirely dead, very sick. Instead of continued political and military struggles, instead of support for Uncle Joe and Chairman Mao, there was a move to develop a new left. A left that could take up the challenge of not only overcoming the capitalists and the bourgeoisie, but also the bureaucratic state formations, including bureaucratic social democracy. This new left would not restrict itself to organizing the working class to fight for socialism, but would intervene in current events and take up the problems of society, such as the threat of nuclear war, the monopolization and possible democratization of the communications industries, and the effect of popular culture on the ethics and imaginations of the people. In 1957, Mao claimed that those moved by the Hungarian uprising, those tempted to be politically sympathetic with its aims, were either revisionist counter-revolutionaries or dupes. Even though Mao had already moved away from a strictly working-class revolutionary politics and embraced the notion of the people as a multi-class formation, he saw the international New Left as a threat from the West. Meanwhile, the New Left, while wanting to break free from Marxist or Stalinist orthodoxy, allowed itself a Maoist undercurrent. And today, Western Marxists, people like Badiou and Zizek, also dabble in or outright embrace a westernized Maoism. So why are there so many Tankies today? For the same reason that there are so many social democrats. We all mostly believe that the state can overcome the contradictions within capitalist economics. After the economic crisis of the 70s and the consequent shift from Fordism to neoliberalism, the left continued to believe in state capitalism as a force that could reconcile the economic contradictions within capitalism, as we told ourselves that neoliberalism should be understood as a primarily political project. In order to suppress all the various people's movements, in order to stop women from getting liberation, for instance, and in general, in order to squelch the demand for freedom from below, the politicians had smashed labor and immiserated their own constituencies. After the economic crisis of 2008, we continued on believing that the foundation of capitalist society, the capitalist-worker relation, could endure without immiseration if the state regulated the banks, or if the state mandated that businesses pay higher wages, or if we made sure everyone had universal health care. Being a Tankie today is a way to both reject the idea that capitalism is a natural limit in the world and to hold on to that idea. It's a way to say no to the United States and to the market and to Coca-Cola, while still saying yes to the only alternative that the left has any theory about or experience with. It's a way to hold on to state capitalism. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons help to make sure that Sublation Media can continue to provide interviews, videos, books, and articles that are critical of the left from the left. If you are tired of remaining stuck within bourgeois ideologies and politics, help us sublate them both.